And just like that, PJ, we are live. My man, I'm Chris Stahl. I am the Longbox Punk. He is PJ Curling, Team Shark. What's up, PJ? How are you, dude?
Team Ninja Shark. You're 0 for 1 already, Chris.
Man.
Team Ninja Shark. Get it right.
I'm just giving you a chance to let your brand shine. That's all. Tell the people about the Ninja Shark that is on a team, hence the Team Ninja Shark. Who are you? What are you? Why are you? Why comics? How'd you end up here?
Well, my name is PJ Curling, and I am the creator and writer of Taking Out the Dead, which is live on Kickstarter right now. And I'm doing it as a comic because I don't have enough money to go make a nice, fancy, shiny TV show or movie with it. And also, indie comics are just rad. Like, they're just cool. They're such a fun medium and such a fun community that it's like, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you give me a little bit about your your hero origin story, if you will? See that heavy comic reference? Give me a little bit about your hero backstory of like where you came from, how you got into comics, and then what made you want to write Taking Out the Dead specifically.
Well, I'm a mediocre middle-aged guy. I live in southeastern Massachusetts, which is where the book is set. I moved up here from Philly about 7 years ago now, and I live in a little place with my wife and our dog, and I've written for most of my life. When I was in high school, I fancied myself a playwright, and then in college, I wrote poetry and short fiction, and the ADHD wouldn't let me do anything longer than a couple of pages.
Yep.
Then I did a lot of sports journalism. I wrote about baseball, basketball. I did a lot of mixed martial arts coverage, pro wrestling. I did a lot of that, and now I'm doing comics because comics are fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, pro wrestling's fun too, though.
I have a unique and rare distinction of being able to say that I was a gorilla position at the last show at the original ECW arena. And I took the last picture in the arena before the renovation.
Oh, that's so rad. I'm going to need you to send me that picture, by the way.
I've got to find it. It's about 7 cameras. It's about 7 cell phones ago and at least 2 Facebook profiles.
Perfect. Yeah, that's first world problems right there, right?
But Chris, when I tell you that the original ECW arena was disgusting, there was like a high tide in the men's room every 3 hours. It was so gross.
That's
so
awful.
Gross.
Yeah. We have a music venue about 45 minutes south where I am in Cincinnati, and I'm not going to say the name, but if people have been to shows in Cincinnati, they know exactly what venue it's like. And before they did renovations, it was very much like you better have waterproof shoes when you go into the and like non-slip shoes, because the floors were just covered. The staff were like, their personalities were covered in the same fecal matter as the bathrooms, and it just it's unfortunate. But I mean, that was like the heart of ECW. Like ECW is very much you're going to get me on a weird pro wrestling tangent here. ECW is very much like the pro wrestling equivalent of the punk rock movement. Like,
oh yeah, 100%.
They just set out to do their thing, and they found a really, really vocal crowd that was behind it. And so the fact that you were a part of it, like that's awesome.
I wasn't there for ECW. I was there with CZW. Yeah.
Okay.
So
lots of blood and lots of. Were you there when they were doing all that like crazy extreme deathmatch stuff, or did that come after?
The first CZW show I went to. So when I was working in MMA, a bunch of the promotions that I worked with would use Maven Bentley's promoter's license. Maven was one of the executives in CZW for a long time. He and I became really good friends, and he invited me down to a CZW show. The first show I went to, I'm standing in the back with my buddy Carl, who's actually in Taking Out the Dead now, and he's a pro wrestler now. It was me, Carl, and Adam Flash. If you know him, he worked on the East Coast scene for a long time as a wrestler.
Okay.
But we were in the back, and Drake Younger was doing it was a what do you call it? Tangled Web. It was Tangled Web 4. And they had panes of glass in all four corners. And it was like a war game setup. They had 2 rings set up, scaffolding, a bunch of barbed wire. And me, Carl, and Adam are standing in the back when Drake Younger put Scotty Vortex through a pane of glass, and it doesn't explode. It just breaks. It's shoot glass. He went through shoot glass and almost lost his thumb. And I saw him like, that doesn't look right. And I look at Adam. I look at Adam, and he just turned white because he knows how bad it really was. So that was my introduction to CZW live and in person.
No greater introduction needed, really. I mean, this
is what it is. People are going to lose body parts here, and we're okay.
Right. So so Taking Out the Dead, issue 1, ta-da, lower third. So tell me about the book. Tell me how you came up with the idea. We're dealing with zombies. We're dealing with gunfights. We're in New England, like you said. Give me your like elevator pitch for the book.
So the elevator pitch is John Wick meets The Last of Us, or if you're old like me, it's Heat meets Dawn of the Dead. Okay. The basic concept is so it all goes back to a conversation I had when I was a firefighter. We were all sitting around the engine bay one day, and it was that conversation you'll have in your 20s. What's your zombie apocalypse plan? And we went around a room that had an ambulance in it, and nobody said, "I'm going to steal that ambulance," which is such a no-brainer to me.
Yeah,
steal an ambulance and find people that know how to shoot guns and fix stuff.
Yeah, that's all you need, really.
Right.
Mechanics, some violent folks, and a driver, and you're set.
Yeah. So that was where the story came from, and that's going back over 20 years.
Okay.
The basic premise is there's a group of people who are surviving a zombie apocalypse in an ambulance. And then that kind of grew into what Taking Out the Dead is now, which is this story arc that we're trying to tell is a family reunion story. It's about a young woman who is from Mid-Atlantic, somewhere near Philly, and she's traveling through New England trying to find her brother, who she heard is still alive in Boston. Mm-hmm. So it's like a race against the clock between her finding him before something forces him out of the city. And it's been 20 years of me trying to figure out how to tell this story. And so if you want the whole story of why we're doing it now, we can do that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
It gets a little sad, but it ends with me doing a comic book, so it's okay.
Great. Okay.
So my mom passed right before Thanksgiving 2022. And in not processing her death, I decided to start writing again. And I started writing the script. And I called my buddy Chris, who's credited as the editor on the book. And Chris had a great relationship with my mom. My mom really considered him her other son. I told him, I said, "Hey, I'm writing that zombie thing again." And he said, "Fuck it, let's just do it. What do you need?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I'm not going to ask you for money, but I need money." So he said, "You work on pages and we'll figure it out." So I wrote 8 pages. And then I went to Kickstarter. I went to r/comic book collabs, and that's where I found Zoo and Marco. And Zoo did the first 8 pages, which is what's the Ash Can now, and what we're using to build the Kickstarter campaign. Mm-hmm. And then once I saw that we were starting to get pages and that this was actually developing into a thing, that's when I started to write the script that you saw today.
That's awesome. So you found Zoo on a subreddit?
Yeah.
What the hell? That's insane to me.
Isn't he an awesome artist?
Yeah.
His work is phenomenal. And he did Equilibrium. He did a run on Stargate. I think he did Stargate Atlantis and Universe. He's done all kinds of stuff.
That's crazy.
His page rate is affordable. Like, his quote wasn't out of control.
Yeah.
I mean, he's worth twice what he's asking, but we could afford it.
Yeah.
That's
awesome. I've heard so many different like obscure avenues like that of writers and artists coming together, from subreddits to Facebook groups to just perusing like hashtags on Instagram and finding somebody's portfolio and just like reaching out and saying, "Hey, I got an idea. What's your art's awesome. Like, let's talk."
Yeah.
And it like every single time I hear something like that, even though knowing it's 2024 and technology has connected folks from around the world, it still just boggles my mind that it's like you found them on a subreddit.
Yeah.
Like Reddit to me is this weird, like dark space with like, you go into a house and like every single room is a subreddit, and then you go into the room and then you want to join a separate party that's off like in the closet of that bedroom, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
No. I always thought of it like family friendly 4chan.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fair.
Yeah. But no, there are a ton of really talented artists on subreddit. And I think part of why we connected with Zoo was we said in our post, we're middle-aged men and we're gonna handle ourselves professionally. We're looking for professionals to work with. Nothing against teenagers who don't have money and are trying to do something cool, because there are a lot of really talented teenagers, but
sure,
we aren't teenagers with no money trying to do something cool. We're adults with some money trying to do something cool.
Right.
If we had more money, we wouldn't need Kickstarter. We would just do the book, but
just do it. Yeah, absolutely. So the Kickstarter's live now. It runs through June 18th, which is as of the published date of this video, little over 3 weeks remaining in the campaign. So tell me about the Kickstarter process for you. So this is your first Kickstarter, right?
Yeah. This is the first Kickstarter. I'm getting very anxious about it. I'm worried. I am really worried that we're going to come up short on our goal. I do have a contingency plan. We're not going to give up if we don't hit our funding goal this round. It's tough. Kickstarter is a really tough beast to handle. I think I launched the campaign a little sooner than I should have. I probably didn't have enough pre-launch followers, or whatever. The campaign page may not looked as good as it should have. But I'm excited to tell the story. Right. I've been waiting 2 decades to tell it. I'm ready to tell it. So we're learning some things. If we do get to our goal, I'm confident that we'll be able to fulfill by September when we want to fulfill. It's just that the initial Kickstarter push wasn't what it needed to be, I think.
Got it. Yeah, I've seen a lot of, because I'm a super backer on Kickstarter.
Yes, you are.
I have seen.
Thank you very much.
Hey, just doing my part, I have seen a lot of messages from creators saying like, hey, getting followers matters because it ups the algorithm, and then having a really strong first like 48 hours also helps a lot with something that they do in the background at Kickstarter to like get it more on like the homepage or the recommended for you section. And so it like, I totally understand the crap, we could have learned this and we could have done this different. But also like, now that we're in it, like what's your like strategy, I guess, for like is it just you like crazy copy pasting the link into replies to people that are looking like, hey, anybody got some cool comics? Like, yeah, I do. Me. Here's the kicks. Like, what is that process like for you?
It's a lot of that. I was originally going to launch the campaign on May 1st, but I had an opportunity to vend at a local convention, Fall River Toy and Comic Palooza, which happened on the 19th. So I pushed the start date back to the 19th, and the hope was that I would get a lot of foot traffic because I can say, hey, this is a comic. There's a gunfight scene that happens in this neighborhood,
Yeah.
and I was hoping that if I could say that to enough people, I'd be able to convert enough of those people into backers that we would have that good first day that Kickstarter looks for, because Kickstarter loves to back a winning horse, right? Like,
Mhm.
the more successful you are, the more successful you are.
Yeah.
It's like diamond distribution. You have to be successful enough to get diamond distribution to get diamond distribution.
Right.
So unfortunately, we were competing with a lot of people selling vintage toys, and I can't compete against nostalgia. And then there were 3 no-show vendors, and they were all in my neighborhood, and it was a slog. It
Yeah.
was a slog. We did about, I wanted to do 20 to 25 backers day one, and we did 12 or 13. Which is good. Like, I'm not saying Sunday was a failure. It just wasn't the success we needed.
Yeah.
So now it's just that uphill battle of, there's some great Twitter accounts that, every day they're like, hey, who's got a project that they're promoting?
Yeah.
Like, so it's just being on those and just connecting with people and just, trying to be a carnival barker, going back to the pro wrestling thing, just being a carny and just saying, hey, this is a thing that we think is cool. I hope you find it cool too. And I hope you think it's cool enough to throw some money our way to help make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing for me that I was like, this is a no-brainer is I'm a fan of horror anyway. So anything with zombies or vampires or werewolves, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually going to be a sucker for those. But also you narratively are using a radio DJ as part of the story.
Yeah.
And that idea, like, because my background is in radio and broadcasting, that idea, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, that's such a cool idea to utilize.
Yeah.
So like, how did you come up with that idea? Like, I could rattle off all the radio movies that inspired me to want to get into radio in the first place. But like, where did that idea come from for you?
So one thing that I don't like in comics is just blocks of exposition, right? Like, you see it in the front of a lot of Marvel books where it's like, here's all the stuff you need to know going into this issue. I
Mm-hmm.
hate that. If I wanted to read blocks of text, I'd read a book. My wife's a librarian. I have access to books. So
Yeah.
I wanted to find a way to deliver that exposition without just blocks of text.
Mm.
And when I started to tell the story of Charlotte, who is the woman trying to find her brother, I decided to pick up her story in Hartford because it's a pretty good, it's close enough to Boston that I don't have to spend a ton of time getting her to the city, but
Yeah.
it's also far enough away that bad shit can happen to her.
Yeah.
So I was doing research on Hartford, and I found this neighborhood called Asylum Hill, and it just clicked with me. Like, I've got my friend Carl. His gimmick is he's basically Paul Bearer if Paul Bearer was a psychiatrist. He's an evil psychiatrist, and he has a tag team that he runs called Unstable and Asylum Hill. Dr. Carl Martin. It just made sense to me.
Yeah.
And it gave me a chance to do some cool things narratively by having him exist in the world, but also talk to the reader and break that fourth wall. But it also gives me an opportunity to use music cues, because when I read a comic going panel to panel, I have a tough time. I have a tough time putting that spatially and time wise. Like, I have a tough time seeing that in a third dimension.
Yeah.
And being able to use music cues, it helps I think it helps the reader pace the book. Like, if you're familiar with the song, you know how long it takes that chorus. And if that chorus leads to another chorus, you know that much time has passed.
Yeah.
And I think it helps bring a two-dimensional story into a third dimension.
That's so smart.
Also,
That's so smart.
I think I'm using pretty cool music.
Yeah,
These songs that I'm listening to when I write, and these, like, in the movie version of this with unlimited cash, Painted Black by the Rolling Stones ends the first episode. The Ataris cover of Don Henley's Boys of Summer starts the episode. Like,
Yeah,
and
you've got Pet Sematary from the Ramones. Like, I thought I was the only person that appreciated that song.
You really thought you were the only person that appreciated Pet Sematary by the Ramones?
Yeah.
Come on.
So I make we don't have a crazy busy subdivision for Halloween, but every year, like, that's my wife and I's jam. We used to work at a local theme park, and we did like the outdoor decor, and then like the inside, like decorating the haunted houses, and then we managed the actors. So like we bonded over Halloween quickly. Mm-hmm. But I made like a 7-hour playlist of Halloween music because I love it. It's all I listen to in October. And every time, like, Pet Sematary is on that playlist because obviously, and every time it comes on and there's parents, they always give me like, it comes on and they look at the speaker and then they look at me and I'm like, this is the Ramones Pet Sematary, and they're like, oh, they're the Gabba Gabba Hey band. I'm like, yeah, the Hey Ho, Let's Go. Yeah, you hear it every sporting event ever. That's the Ramones. This is also the Ramones.
Same band, yeah. And it's the Ramones. It's not like it's some hardcore band from Youngstown.
Right.
It's the Ramones.
Yeah, I'm not putting like
8-year-olds walking around in Ramones t-shirts now. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, you can buy them at Walmart. You should know at least their like top 20 songs, and I feel like Pet Sematary is at least in their top 10. Personally, for me, it is. I mean, I was always more of a UK punk. Like, that's what got me into the scene to begin with. But then I quickly learned I knew I had to pick a side between the Clash and the Ramones, and I went with the Clash. But that doesn't mean I didn't listen to the entire discography of the Ramones and was like, okay, no, I like that too a lot. But I like the Clash. Man, Combat Rock is the album for me that was just like, music can be like this. And it just opened me up to so much more that I then, started chasing down all sorts of stuff. So, but
the band that did that for me was AFI.
Okay.
The first time I heard the Black Sails in the Sunset, blew my mind.
Yep.
That whole era, that whole gothy era was just unreal. And then this murder, and it was
just commercialized emo, and it was like still good, but man, give me lead sails and paper anchors. That's the album. Like, give me their early 90s stuff, especially the All Hallows Eve EP.
All Hallows Eve it's All Hallows Eve, Shape of Punk to Come for me, 1 and 2.
Yeah, just 90s good AFI. I love it. I'm here for it, man. So speaking of music, because we're already talking about music, I know you said you listen to it while you're writing. Are you one of the ones that can listen to music with lyrics as you're writing?
I can have a conversation with somebody while I'm writing.
Get out of here.
Yeah. I'm not saying I can write well while I do that, but I can do it.
That's fair.
Actually, because of my job, I have a lot of downtime, so I actually get a lot of writing done while I'm at work. And the music I listen to isn't necessarily, I mean, it's not laden with, go fuck your mother type lyrics, but it's not necessarily appropriate for my work setting.
That's fair.
So a lot of times I'll just put a podcast on, or I'll just put on, I'll just put on something so that there's noise, because ADHD, I need constant stimulation.
Yep.
But yeah, like ideal setting, I've got a Spotify playlist. It's probably 3 hours long of stuff that I listen to while I'm working.
Do you
And I mean,
find
it's
that
everything from AFI to like Willie Nelson to Don Henley to, all over the place.
that's not jarring at all?
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's totally, yeah. I mean, personally, like my brain goes, oh yeah, no, that makes sense, because you might get really angsty, and then an angsty song comes on, and then you're like, okay, I got it out, and then happy. For me, it's like I'll go to like super dancey, and admittedly like disco. Some like the Bee Gees come on, man, and I will dance like nobody's business.
Pop bangers, man. I mean, they could write a pop song.
They knew how to hook people, and I am people.
That needs to be your first t-shirt. I am people.
I am people. That's it. Yeah, it'll just huge block lettering. Absolutely. So tell me, you mentioned work. How does someone in your profession write a zombie comic book? Like, how does
everybody in my department, we're all dark, broken people. You have to be, so I'm a clinical assistant in a special ed program, and we specialize. We only have male students, and our kids are 12 to 22. They're all DCF, DCYF kids, and we get the Dateline kids. To be able to work with those kids the way we do, either like, I've got trauma and I'm broken in a bunch of different ways, but I've been able to process my trauma in healthier ways. I've been, and I was fortunate enough that I was raised in a loving, compassionate home. Sure. So because of where I come from, I feel like I almost have to work with these kids, and I'm able to give these kids a good, healthy life experience before they go out into the world and end up wherever they end up, good or bad. But yeah, my whole department, we're all sick. So yeah, I mean, the jokes we tell each other are just HR nightmares.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean,
Ellen does not wander down to our part of the building.
It's probably for her sake as much as it is for yours.
For sure.
If you're anything like me, I would imagine that the best way to cope with, probably, I'm sure, like the darkness that you're experiencing or hearing about, is to just like, you have to laugh. Yeah. Like personally, I'm the person that in really awkward and completely incorrect moments, I will crack a joke or start giggling, and I just can't stop. Like, I'm the person at the funeral that has to leave the chapel because I start giggling, because I think of either a story or a joke or something with the deceased, and like I'm celebrating the fact that I had that joy with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
no, 100%.
It seems like emotionally tone deaf to everybody else, because I just start giggling, and it's like, I can't, you don't understand it. Like, everything's fine. There was this, you had to be there. It was really uncomfortable, but like, it was really, really funny. I'm
a firm believer that if you can laugh about something, you can process something. Like when my mom passed, she was back home and I'm up here. So, obviously I wasn't around. And I got a call from the police from her apartment, and they put the medical examiner on the phone with me. And the first thing I said was, well, have you eliminated the cat as a suspect? Uh-oh.
You're just an avatar now.
Uh-oh. Nothing happened.
I mean, I can talk to a circle.
Okay. I
have no idea what would cause that.
I don't have any idea what happened. Do you want me to log out and log back in?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay,
I can fill some time. All right.
okay, I'm gonna try that real quick then.
All right. See, folks, this is what happens when you do live interviews. Sometimes technology doesn't work for you, and you have to do things like turn it off and turn it back on again, or log out of the studio and log back into the studio. So I appreciate your patience as you hang with me, the Longbox Punk, as we walk through this. Also, while I have you here just exclusively with me, you should totally back PJ's book. It's really, really good. I read the script for issue 1 and 2. He's got some really awesome stuff coming. So you should definitely go check out the Kickstarter link, which is going to be in this video description. And look at that. Just like a pro, he's back. IT, baby. Turn it off and turn it back on.
Works 90% of the time. It works 40% of the time.
I mean, it really does. I used to do tech, and sometimes people would be like, my computer is not connecting to the thing. I'm like,
turn it off and on.
Turn it back on again. I haven't tried that yet. Like, how does everybody not know that at this point? That should be step number 1. Just, you know what I mean?
Never underestimate the stupidity of people in large numbers.
Touche. See, that's a good, that would be a great shirt for one of your characters, like one of your zombies to be wearing. Because they're all brain dead, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just stumbled into a great thing hey, Zoo, can you just add this in real quick?
Merchandising. I love it.
There it is.
Baseball's
absolutely.
Speaking
of merchandising, man, this is that seamless transition if I didn't call it out. You have an incredible reward tier in your Kickstarter where people can get a 3.5-inch floppy disk. What?
And a cassette full of music inspired by Taking Out the Dead.
Come on. If I had a cassette player, I would absolutely be backing that pledge level. I don't have a cassette player at this point, so I get it and just, here's my cassette.
Remember these?
I do.
Remember real life save icons?
Anybody under the age of 20, that's what's called a floppy disk. They used to have
what? We used to put stuff on these and take them places.
Your little thumb drive that holds 74 gigs of data, that it equals like 9,000 of those floppy disks.
You could get about 3/4 of a speed metal song on one of these, and it would be mono 19-bit. It would sound absolutely horrible, and we loved every second of it.
And it was amazing. We were thankful.
It was the future. It was the future, man. We were living in the Jetsons.
That's right. Even I even remember the discs that were even bigger than those.
Oh yeah,
like the super plastic. Yeah,
I remember those. I remember carts. Remember, like I had a Tandy that used cartridges.
Now you're beating me. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I did though learn DOS command because I had to, because the home computer we had only had DOS. So it was like run command and then the carrots. So I had like battle tanks and I had a crazy chess game where the pieces would come to life and the castle would like smash the person and pick them up and laugh as they. Yeah.
No, that game was awesome.
It was so good. I was terrible, but I loved. My favorite was the castle because he would step on him and squish him, and then just like pick up their flat and he would turn it, and you would see the character was just 2D flat, and then he would drop them, and they would like fall like a piece of paper. It's my favorite thing about that game, but it was all through DOS.
Yeah,
and so like I had to know how to program. So once I got into computer classes, it was like, this is a DOS prompt window. I'm like, yeah. And I would just like run the execute stuff. Like, oh, you don't have any cool games on here.
You were a hacker.
I wasn't that proficient. I wish that I had pursued it though, because then I could absolutely be a hacker instead of working in finance and customer service like I do. But that's fine. That's fine. That's neither here nor there either.
So
So
yeah,
you,
go ahead.
I just thought like the floppy disk, like what made you? Were you just like, yeah, nostalgia, floppy disk? I haven't seen this before because I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Kind of. I figured it was a unique hook, but also one of the characters. I call it his deal a runner, and he's basically a messenger between cities. And back when the internet was, Christ, not even really dial up, it was called sneakernet, where it would take longer to send an email than it would to write something on a piece of paper, put it in your pocket, and walk it to whoever you were sending it to.
Yeah.
And in the mythology of this world, like, you still have electricity, and there are people who are running pirate radio stations, and there are intranet connections, or like BBS type boards that are online for these micro communities that have gotten together. But for Hartford to talk to Boston, they've got to put something on a piece of paper, put in somebody's pocket, and take it to Boston. So there's a lot of like retro tech that we're hopefully going to get into. And I just figured, like, in a zombie apocalypse, you're not gonna have access to all your music on the cloud. So how are you gonna listen to your music?
Yeah. Physical
So,
media, man.
Physical media. I love physical media. I wish I had enough money and space to have all of the records and DVDs and all the other cool stuff I had when I was younger.
Yep, I agree. For me, it was mainly I sold off the majority of it in college so that I could eat. But it's
Come on,
all...
what's more important, food or that Matrix limited edition DVD box set?
A Matrix DVD limited edition box set. Yep. So I wanted to call that out because that's a great pledge level too. By the way,
it's
anybody watching, it's affordable.
Bucks.
You get a floppy disk drive. Now, how you're gonna convert that to actually, do they still make like jump drives that you can, like a dongle that you can connect? Because that's what you would need, right?
This is my 3.5-inch USB drive.
Yeah, because of course you have it sitting right there.
Why wouldn't I? It's right next to my limited edition Beskar steel external hard drive.
I was about to shit a brick.
M.2 that I have in my computer.
I was really hoping you were going to say it's right next to my limited edition Matrix DVD box set. I was going to lose my mind.
I wish I had that kind of foresight. But actually,
now that you mention it, just give me 2 seconds here.
now that you got me thinking. No.
So what's the process like working with Zoo? Because I'm assuming he doesn't live in New England.
He's in Portugal. Zoo's in Portugal, and Marco is in Italy. And Patrick Buermeyer, who did the cover, is, I think, in New Hampshire, because he just finished up Granite State Punk #4, which I'm sure you read. I'm sure you're reading, and it's going to be, I can't wait to see it, because that guy's just such a talent. Oh, look at you.
Awesome. Have a project or an interview coming up with Travis.
Awesome.
Who did the writing for Granite State Punk. And yeah, so we're going to talk about the 4th one at some point, whenever, I don't remember. It's in my calendar, which can sometimes not be trusted, apparently.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was 100% going to give you the pass.
I'll throw myself out. It's fine. If I can recognize it, then I can just admit it and I can move on from it.
And we can laugh about it. And if we can laugh about it, we can process it.
Amen. So what's the creative process like with a team that is spread out literally all over the globe?
It has been surprisingly easy. You probably saw it reading the script. Since I don't think visually, I just kind of have an idea of what the space looks like and what's happening in the space. I give Zoo a lot of information to work with in the panel description, And right when we started working together, I said, I'm going to give you more than you need. Just, I trust you as a professional to find the most compelling angle of this for the panel. And I just give him as much as I can and trust him to do what he does. And I mean, so far he's done nothing but put out incredible work.
Yeah. Yeah, I did notice it. So I think your writing style is very similar to my attempts at writing, where like I have all of this information. I have no idea how it should look or the most compelling way to, or like moving through a page. I don't know how to communicate that. But reading it, I was like, I have my idea of what that would look like. And so now I'm curious to see, like, I need this book in my hands is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
PJ, because I need to know like what he came up with and how his interpretation of your script is different from what my brain came up with.
Well,
And
I need to see it too. I want to see that as well. And a big part of it is not being precious with the material. I think one of the things that I needed to do in the last 20 years was get to a point where I just I genuinely don't care if anybody reads this book. Obviously I want people to read it and I want them to enjoy it. But for me, the finish line is having the story in a position where I can tell it, not that it's told and people respond to it. It's just the expression of the story that's the completion of the journey for me for it. And since that's the finish line for me, if Zoo finds a more compelling way to tell the story, great. We're telling a better story.
Yeah.
So it's really being in that kind of headspace makes it really easy to trust somebody, even though we've never had an auditory conversation. Like we've never spoken on the phone or in a video chat or anything like that. It's all been strictly through email, and I trust them implicitly to create the best story that the three of us can.
That's awesome. So is it all black and white?
Yeah. It's black and white for two reasons that are kind of equally important. The more equally important is that it is very expensive to do color interiors in a book. Not that it's cheap to do black and white, but it is much less cheap to do it in color.
Sure.
And the other part is I said I don't think about things visually, but when I do consider what the book looks like, I see it in black and white because the books that kind of informed me as a comic creator are in black and white. Not that you see the influence, but Scud Disposable Assassin is one of my favorites of all time.
Okay.
And a lot of Becky Cloonan's work, especially like her early stuff with Brian Wood, like DMZ and Channel Zero, like that kind of stuff. They're kind of my touchstones for when I think about what a good comic book can look like. And when you think about especially zombie stories, everything is gray, everything is like earth tones, and things can kind of blend and blur and muddle together a little bit. So putting things in black and white keeps things clear. And it also forces the reader to fill in gaps, to fill in the fine tuning type stuff. And I think that making a reader kind of fill in those details makes the story more personal to them. It gives them more investment in the story so that, down the line, when I do start killing main characters, and I'm fucking gonna, it makes an emotional impact.
Yeah.
We're not going to see it probably in the first couple of books, but I wrote one of the main characters' death scenes already. And when I wrote it, I cried. And I'm not emotionally attached to this, but if I can get people invested in these characters, we're going to do some shit to their heartstrings. We're going to fuck with them a little bit.
I mean, I think the best stories that are told are the ones that make you feel something. And
Yeah. Yeah.
like I'm re-listening to so I don't I because of my ADHD, I can't sit and read like a novel. But I can consume the shit out of an audiobook.
Yeah.
And so because like I do a lot of driving, and so I listen to a ton of audiobooks, and I'm re-listening to one now that it's been like 3 years since I listened to it. So I forgot the majority of what happens.
Mhm.
And when one of the characters just died, it hit me all over again of like, oh God, what the hell? Like, it's how are you going to kill her off? Like, what do you do? And
Yeah.
that investment, like, it caught me off guard. And I just, like, I was sitting in traffic, thankfully, because I was just sitting there. And I had the moment of like, what the hell? Oh God, that's what that means. Oh no, she's about to die. And so it just like, I think that's why I wanted to come back to it, because I remember the first time just thinking, like, man, that book was so well written. It grabbed me. I was invested. It deals with a lot of the broadcasting tech, but also like future dystopian and zombies. And so, like, all of it is there in this book. And I just remember, like, I've read a ton of horror books and a ton of like zombies and vampires and where like the classic monsters.
Mhm.
And this one is probably one of the few that I have returned to and that I'll probably return to again because it just is so, it's very well done.
Yeah.
But I think like engaging the readers, having to fill in some of the like, oh, okay, this, like with black and white art, you definitely do. Like I quickly am thinking of black and white books that I've read that I have taken more time reading because it is kind of that like, I got to figure out, like, I got to put this together. And then I feel more invested because my brain has put some of what's on the page into even more of real life.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think as a device of comics, it's a really smart thing to play with, just even being aware that you can play with it because you're engaging readers in a way that, like, a full color, here's all of the things and all the pieces and I'm giving you everything you could possibly want. You don't have to think, you can just read it and look at it and enjoy it. I think having a book that you kind of have to slow down and think about to fully ingest and appreciate, for me, like,
Yeah.
that's comic books done very well.
Yeah. And, like, for me, it's very important that this book is really grounded. Like, I want this to feel very real to people. And, like, everybody, when people think about an ambulance, everybody has a different color scheme in their head. People have
Yeah.
different color light bars. They can go red, blue, blue. Everybody's idea of what an ambulance looks like is different, color wise at least.
Mhm.
So when I present a black and white ambulance, they're not thinking about, maybe not, they may not necessarily think about like what a Boston EMS ambulance looks like. They're going to think about the one from their neighborhood because that's naturally what's going to come to mind. So like that makes it more real to them because like the ambulance is an ambulance that they've seen.
Yeah.
So that's going to make it easier for me to fuck with them when I start killing people.
Yep. So do you, being the dark sense of humor person, are you having more fun writing some of the gorier scenes in the book, specifically those main character deaths? Or is like the whole process just fun for you?
Um, I don't know that it's really fun. Like it's not a chore, but it's just there's a story that needs to be told. I just sit down and I just it's almost not mechanical, but it's not, I don't sit there and go you know what I mean?
You're not the like evil genius. Well,
No, no, I'm not, no, it just like when I wrote the death scene, um I woke up early one morning and it was just there. All I had to do was sit down and transcribe it. Um, and dude, I'm really proud of it.
that's so
Like
cool.
I'm really proud of how it came out. But it like it was there, whole cloth. And that's the way a lot of it is. It's just I start writing and it's there. And obviously I go back and I try to make it good,
Sure.
but it's it just kind of comes.
That's crazy. I wish my brain worked like that. I'll get like clips and phrases and like names or settings, and then I have to write that down. And then I'm like, okay, well, how do I make this mean anything at all? And then
So
I have
go back to when you were about 10 or 11 years old, experience severe trauma, and then don't process it for 30 years.
Got it. Okay. All right.
And then you'll have all the tools you need to be a broken creative like me.
Perfect. Got it. I'm going to hit pass on that. It's nothing personal. I just,
that's also a choice.
I'll keep my trauma the way it is. I won't make it worse.
That's you.
That's a choice. I mean, you do you. So let me check. I had something specific that I was going to ask you, and nope, I must have thought it and then forgot it because I was laughing at my trauma. Speaking of trauma, because you said, I'm not putting you on the spot, you said you would be comfortable talking about it. I want to talk just a little bit about depression because not enough people talk about it. And I feel like as someone that deals with trauma on a daily basis and helping others through that, I feel like your perspective on it might be a unique one that I'm really interested to hear just how you think about it, how you approach it, that sort of thing, if you don't mind.
Sure. It's funny. I just got finished a session with my therapist before we got on, and we were doing a lot of trauma related talk. And one of the things we were talking about is the way I look at life is you're born and you're on a path, right? There's your destination, and each trauma, whether it's minor or major, pulls you farther off of that path. And it can take you in 1,000 different roads, healthy and unhealthy. And what I'm trying to do is not get back to that path, because for me, I think that path was to be an Ivy League scholar and professional third baseman. Like that was what I thought I was going to be when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But my job for myself is to get myself back onto a healthy track where, I'm not still being pulled away from what I should be, but I'm on a path to what I can be. And one of the things that I think is important about my job working with these kids is they've been pulled off their path by trauma that they had no choice in. The things that happened to them, but not because of them.
Yeah.
So they were robbed of the opportunity to have that path. So if I can get them on a healthy path and help them experience a healthy, happy life from here on out, then that's a pretty cool job to have.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake of ignoring my depression and my trauma for 30 years. And now that I'm in my mid 40s, we're at least in the second half. Now I've got a lot of heavy lifting to do. So, I mean, shit, man, if bad shit happened, just talk about it. Find somebody that you trust and fucking talk about it. There's no shame in having bad stuff happen to you. And there's no shame in not talking about it, but the healthier way is to just, process.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. So I've done the therapist route. I've done the medication route. For me, what worked, the first time I talked to my doctor about it, I was like, listen, I mentally, I just don't feel like I'm where I should be. And I don't know how to have this conversation. And I was taught, like, you just don't talk about emotions.
Right.
Like, I was witness to my parents fighting and getting divorced and dealing with all of that. Dealing with, like, my sister having screaming matches with both parents at separate times, and like just all sorts of weird, and then like plenty of relatives dying and like mentors passing away unexpectedly, like all of this stuff in those formative years. And I don't really feel like I was ever told like, hey, this is something that you should be talking about. It was just something that was like, oh, like it, yeah, that happened. And also like, hey, like, did you see wrestling last night? Like,
Yeah.
and so it like, I never
Because it's easy,
faced
as
any.
hard as it is, it's easier to not. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Cause if you talk about it, like it's a very vulnerable thing to say, like, hey, I had this happen. And also like I'm still a whole person. Like I had those things and I lived through that trauma and dealt with all this shit.
Yeah.
And also like that doesn't, I never wanted to have somebody pity me. Like somebody pitying me is the worst thing
Right.
that you can do other than belittling, because that's like, ooh, don't you talk down to me. But like those are the two things for me that it's just like I never want somebody to be like, oh, you had some really tough stuff, oh, are you okay? And it's like, you don't need to bubble wrap me. I'm still a person. I
Yeah.
just like
And
lived
you're and
through
you're
some
and you
stuff.
can deal with heavier shit because you've dealt with heavy shit.
Right.
So you don't need to be protected because you've already gotten kicked in the face.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
why
like,
wear a
what
mouth
more
guard?
can you do?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What more can you do
Yeah.
to me?
And I think a lot of people don't talk about it, especially the kind of trauma that I deal with at work. Nobody wants to talk about it because, to say that I was in an abusive relationship or I was witness to a child getting trafficked, to say that is a sea change. Like you say I was in an abusive relationship, you can never go back to a time before you were in an abusive relationship. And nobody wants that to be part of their story. But it's way more common than we think. I
Yeah.
think the stats are 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 7 boys are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. I mean, those numbers are too small to think that you're getting through life without knowing somebody that was sexually assaulted. You know,
Yeah.
so like, let's talk about it. I have kids that because of the trauma they experience are sexually attracted to children, but because nobody wants to talk about pedophilia, there's no path to mental health for pedophiles.
Yeah.
And there are pedophiles that haven't acted on those feelings, but there's also no path to a healthy life for them. So how do we help those people if we don't talk about it?
Right.
So let's talk about pedophilia. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how brains are broken in that way and how we can get people with those crossed wires uncrossed. But nobody wants to talk about it because it's gross and scary.
Right.
We'd rather brag about how deep under a prison we bury somebody after they lose that fight.
Yeah.
And create another victim who could potentially be another abuser, because
Yep.
it's a cycle. It's a cycle. A lot of abusers were abused. So why can't we focus on breaking the cycle instead of responding to it?
Right. Yeah, that's heavy stuff, and also
Indie
like
comics.
indie comics.
No, but I mean, like, I appreciate you letting me talk about it because it's something that I really it's a really important thing to me that we do better than we're doing for sexual assault victims, because we're basically not doing anything. There are so many unprocessed rape kits in this country, it would make you vomit. And there's 1 in 10 sexual abusers ever spend a day in jail. 1 in 10.
That's insane.
And then when somebody talks about somebody famous or important assaulting them, everybody's like, oh, they're just doing it for attention. What kind of attention do you think these people are trying to get?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's it I know people that in high school told me like, hey, I had this happen to me, and it was just like, that's such an awful thing to happen, that
especially at that young of an age.
yeah, and like they had waited like 10 years to say something, and so they were, under the age of 10 and had these things happen to them, and it was just like, I don't know how you can function. Like, to me, the idea of that happening, it had it happened to me personally, like, I don't know how I wouldn't just be a broken mess.
Yeah. And Chris, we have 40 kids on campus at my school. We are not the only school that serves this community. Our tuition is $750,000 per calendar year, and we have a waiting list as long as my arm and longer.
It's so upsetting. Like,
Isn't it?
how,
Isn't it? And I'm so thankful that you're letting me talk about it on a show about comic books, because this is going to help destigmatize it. Because
yeah,
these are conversations that we have to have as a society, as a community, as human beings. Like, these are the conversations that we're afraid to have because they are gross, scary subjects.
right.
But we're all adults now, and we have to deal with gross, scary things.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm wired to want to fix. And
Same.
I think it, not to be gender stereotypical, but like every close male friend that I have is the exact same way. Like, our wives say, "Oh, I have a problem with this." Instead of just saying, "Oh, that's really hard, I'm sorry." It's, "Well, have you thought about doing this? Like, here's a solution that you could try." And so hearing that like these awful things are happening, and I mean, even locally here in my hometown, there's a recovery organization that helps give former inmates a second chance once they get released. And so they're employing them, they're giving them therapy, they're giving them space, they're giving them small groups and church time, and like they're trying to do a holistic approach to help these folks break the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, I can't go in and do anything personally for those people, but I can go buy a cup of coffee from their coffee shop and tell all my friends, like, yeah, go to the Fringe, like, go buy coffee from them, go eat their food, talk to their people. Like, everybody that's helping you is a former inmate. And even that alone, like, I've done interview. My dad used to work and teach like a ready for life class for inmates that were soon to be released from prison.
That's
And
all.
so he would bring me in to do like mock interviews with people, because I've done management for all sorts of different industries. And so I've got interview experience. And so he would bring me in and I would just interview the inmate and take some notes. And like those notes then could lead to conversations with the inmates after the fact. Like, hey, really calm, really confident. Maybe don't jump to the fact that, like, I asked you what experience you have, and you immediately went to, well, I just got out of prison. So, because they're like, they teach how to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And one, like, working with those inmates, it just gave me a very different perspective, because all we see is what's on TV,
Sure.
right? We hear about the jail slaughters and fights that are happening inside the jails, and all of the gangs and all of the violence and all of the trauma and the sexual assaults and the negative.
Right.
No one ever bothers to tell the positive stories of like, these people are actually like rehabilitating their lives. They're turning themselves
And nobody
around.
talks about how tough that is. It is
Yeah.
hard work to be on probation in this country.
Yeah.
I've also worked with probationers, and I worked before I got to where I'm at now. I worked with an agency that did drug testing for probation courts. So I was the guy in the bathroom watching guys pee into cups. I was a professional cock watcher for a little while. But like,
interesting work experience.
I've done a little bit of everything. So like, working with those guys, like, I really learned what our probation system was like. And I learned pretty quickly that for most of these guys, everybody, the judge, the DA, their probation officer, their family, in a lot of cases, are all rooting against them. So why should I be on that bandwagon? So I rooted for them, and I had a lot of success stories, and it was really just my own edification. It was really rewarding to see guys go from having no visitation rights with their kids to having limited supervised to having unsupervised structured time. Like, watching those success stories, those are some of the biggest wins I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
You know, and another big part of it, like you said, is to not treat people with pity. You know, I talk to my students the same way I talk to you, because they all have developmental delays. I talk a little bit slower, but I treat them like tiny adults. Yeah. And I get better results than a lot of my coworkers because of that.
It's funny how something as simple as just like respect and common decency go such a long way.
Yeah.
Because like, even with the inmates that I did the mock interviews with, I didn't feel like I was doing much at all, because I was just asking them questions, taking notes, and then talking about the notes that I had with them. But after the fact, like, there were several that I had interviewed that like told my dad, like, hey, that was your son, right? Like, you should, I didn't feel like I was an inmate. Like, he didn't demonize me when he was talking to me. I didn't feel any of that negative that I'm used to feeling with everybody else that comes in here. And it was just
gave
like
them a normal interaction when their experiences have been abnormal. And that goes such a long way with people who have abnormal experiences.
Yep.
Because my kids know that they don't have a typical life. You know, they know that they're not average 13, 14, 16. They know they're not average. So why treat them like they're not average?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Why point out the glaring thing that they're already aware of?
Yeah.
Like, that's not helpful.
No, because on top of everything else my kids are going through, they're also going through puberty.
Yeah, they're also 13, 14, 16.
Right,
yeah.
Right. You know,
those are not easy years.
No, hard times are harder. And like, you know, I work with a lot of people that make those hard times even harder. And it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah, and I just appreciate like being able to talk with somebody that's got your experience, that can share some of your perspective too, because I don't want it to always be like, a lot of my coworkers are always like, oh, we need to talk about mental health and mental wellness. And it's like, okay.
That's what I hear when I hear people say that.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so let's talk about it. And like, oh, wait, well, I didn't mean like right this second.
I didn't mean actually talk about it.
It's like the thoughts and prayers when people like, don't fucking waste my time. Like, are you actually praying?
I want anger and action instead of thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
Let's get mad and do shit now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fuck thoughts and prayers.
Let's enact change.
That's self-edification. That's self-edification. That's, you know, that's the Pharisees praying in front of people, dude. Like, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I know you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I've listened to the show.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. Like, so many people seem like they're all talk and they're no action. Mm-hmm. And so like, part of, I guess, my credo for the show is, and I mentioned it before we hit the go live button, but like, I'm never gonna censor anybody that comes on the show, because we're censored. We're told what to think. We're told what to say. We're told how to act all the time by society. Mm-hmm. Like, indie comics for me have always been an escape. If things are shitty, I can pick up an X-Men book and suddenly it's okay that things are shitty and I'm different, because so are they.
Right.
Like, that
and
was
things are shitty for them too.
Hey, right. They have their own issues. And it's not just like, oh, I put another hole in my gloves because my claw popped out. Like, oh God, it's like real life issues that they're dealing with. And so like, I think that's the beauty of comics. And that's why I'm forever going to do this show as long as humanly possible, until YouTube is like, you're done. Because like, there are comics that deal with real life shit
Mm-hmm.
that give people a much needed escape, and also like, oh, I'm not alone in this. Like, this character might be dealing with this. Maybe
Yeah.
the creator is dealing with this. Maybe there are other people that are reading this that are dealing with this same thing. Like, I'm not alone.
Right.
And so, like, that is my underlying through line, subtext, whatever you want to say, with every interview that I do. And not all of them get as heavy as you and I have gotten,
God,
but
I would hope
also,
not.
right? Yeah, I don't think I can handle that. But I do think that, like, when given the opportunity, I'm gonna lean into it,
Yeah.
because like, we just can't be scared to talk about real
Right.
shit. Like,
And
we're
it's
just
like I said,
people.
and it's like I said before we went live when we were talking, like, this is a hobby. Like, I'm not a professional writer by any stretch of the imagination. I am not a professional writer by any definition. This is a hobby for me, and it's an escape from what I do for work, but also what I do for work and the experiences I have are obviously going to filter through the writing. Like Carl's character, the narrator character.
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out a way to take him through a mental health journey and still keep him as a trustworthy source to the reader.
Yeah.
I have some ideas on what I want to do to and with him, and I know how he ends, and when Carl ends his story, the story ends, and I have an idea for that, and I'm trying to figure out how to get from where we are now to there, and keep him as a trustworthy source to the reader.
Yeah.
But like, I want to take him on a mental health journey because I'm on a mental health journey.
Yeah.
And if you're going through an apocalypse, and over the last 8 years it has felt apocalyptic occasionally, like you're going to go through some mental health struggles.
Right.
So how can I take my experiences through my own trauma and through the trauma that I process with my kids? How can I filter that into a palatable story about a guy playing Ramones songs to his neighborhood while they're being eaten by the undead? which is a kind of mental math that I've never considered having to do before, but here we are.
Here we are. That's right. Well, speaking of here we are, we have come to a segment on the show that I look forward to, where I just hand everything over to you. If there's anything that you've got on your heart, on your mind, it could be comic related, it could be Taking Out the Dead related, it could be unrelated to anything we've talked about. I'm going to give you the floor to talk about anything that you want people to hear or know or think about or consider, or anything like that. The floor is yours.
Well, first, I want to thank you not just for having me on the show, that's greatly appreciated, but thank you for this conversation. Like, to be able to say some of the things that I've said tonight to an audience that isn't the choir, to be able to talk about mental health to people who don't work in mental health, it's such an awesome opportunity that I appreciate. And to that end, I would just encourage anybody, if you're struggling, reach out to somebody. Even if you just have to email me, teamninjashark@gmail.com, say, hey, PJ, I'm struggling with something. I will help you find the resources that you need. Henry Rollins said it best. I think he said, the world's a better place with you in it. So stay in it as long as you can and fight and do whatever you have to, even if it's reach out to some jackass you heard on a podcast talking about a comic book you're never going to read. And if you are motivated to do something positive in the lives of people who have been dealt a shit hand, look into human services jobs in your area. There are agencies that work with developmentally delayed consumers. They work with traumatized consumers. There are people who work with every kind of person dealing with every kind of difficulty in this world that you can imagine. And every agency I can think of is desperate for staff. So please consider that, even if it's part-time. All of that, public service type stuff out of the way. Taking Out the Dead is live on Kickstarter right now. We need to raise about $4,000 more dollars. We've got until June 18th to do it. And honestly, Chris, if we don't, we'll just re-rack and try it again. But you can find us online at teamninjashark.com, or just search Taking Out the Dead on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, Kickstarter.
Perfect. And I'm going to have the website, the campaign linked below, and then also handful of your socials, so that all they have to do is expand the show description, and then they can most likely tap, because who watches anything on an actual computer at this point other than you, PJ? Other than you
that still have 3.5-inch floppy disks within arm's reach.
See, you already proved you're the outlier, man. But yeah, I'll make it super simple for anybody that's watching to find PJ, find Taking Out the Dead campaign on Kickstarter, because I want this book in my hand. So join me in backing it, and let's make it a reality. PJ, thank you so much for coming on. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I love your perspective. I love what you're doing. If no one has said it to you recently, thank you for what you're doing. It is so fucking important to protect kids. And like, at the core of who I am, and you're going to get me emotional, is like, we should be doing everything we can as adults to protect and celebrate kids. Like, they need to have better futures than we have. And so anything that we can do to give them a better future, we should be doing. So thank you for the work. I can only imagine the type of day that you like. I will never, ever think like, man, I had a hard day today, and then immediately think, PJ had a worse day. He's dealing with real dark, evil shit. I guess that wasn't so bad of a day anymore.
I have very weird days. I have very weird conversations at work. I'll put it that way.
I bet. But yeah, thank you so much for spending the evening with me, hanging out with me. I cannot wait to see Taking Out the Dead hit its goal and get this book in hand later this year. So we got 3 weeks to tap the link and throw some money at PJ. Get the 3.5-inch floppy.
Give me the money. Give me the money so I can make cool shit happen.
Give him all the money, and then we can all celebrate the book together when it releases. Thank you so much. This has been another interview here on the Long Box Punk. I am Crystal, and until next time, punks, do the thing that I always tell you to do and go read some comics. See ya.